Good good morning and welcome to a special edition of COVID Calls. I'm your host Chris Perugine, and today we're going to be discussing the situation in America, the fallout after the George Floyd murder. I've got two Maltese people of color with me, Yannick and Jacob. Thanks both for being on the show. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes, we
thanks for
can hear
having
you.
us.
Thanks for having us.
So for those of you who don't know, Yannick and Jacob are both footballers. They're both young Maltese men who are black and have a lot to say about what's going on in America. Um, for those of you who haven't been following, a man, George Floyd, was died at the hands of a policeman, well, on the knee of a police officer who has now been charged with murder and manslaughter. And that sparked protests and riots across America because this sort of feels like the final nail in the coffin, the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of violence from police and authorities, specifically against black men. So I just want to start. I'll start with you, Yannick. I just want to get your reaction to that video that now has been seen around the world. I could barely stomach to watch it myself. I want to know how you felt when you were watching that video.
Um, basically, I saw the video. It was on someone's like Insta. It was like a full video on Insta, right? And I had no idea like what had happened. So I just opened up the video, and I don't usually watch these things because it fucks with my mental health, honestly. Like fucks me up. So I try to avoid them as much as I can. But this one was, I had no information on it, so I was just watching. And yeah, basically was just 10 minutes of this guy on a black guy's neck. It hurt more because shooting is quick, right? You can understand someone thinking about it, being enraged and thinking in a split second and just shooting someone, right?
Or being
So,
afraid. Or
or
being
being afraid, even though that's, a policeman should not stereotypically be afraid of a black man. But seeing that and seeing for 10 minutes this guy being on the other guy's neck, I've been messed up all week, honestly. So, and I've been on Twitter all week and I've been seeing like everything else that's been going on. And right now, like, it's been a crazy time.
what
So,
about you, Jacob? How did you feel when you watched the video?
Honestly, I had to watch the video as much as I didn't want to. I had to watch it at least five, six times, because I wasn't processing like the fact that this actually happened, like, and in front of my face. You know what I mean? In front of so many people that were on the street just walking by, and the people that were videoing. You know what I mean? Like, the fact that someone like unarmed, you know what I mean, was brutally murdered in front of people's faces for no apparent reason, you know what I mean? After he spent around 8 to 10 minutes telling police like how he couldn't breathe. I mean, it was just it felt like an assassination, you know what I mean? Well, that's lynching, the word, you know what I mean? That was basically lynching. And unfortunately, like, people are too scared to do anything about it. You know what I mean? They're too scared to voice their opinion. They're too scared to physically do something because of the repercussions that might happen. You know what I mean? Um,
I
but
guess
I mean, it's happened way too many times. You know what I mean? Way too many times for it to continue the way it's going. Anyways, like.
I think it's important to talk a bit about how this is just one incident that happened to be filmed and happened to result in a death, but there's so many incidents that go unnoticed and unreported that are similar. Just for those of you who don't know, George Floyd was just reported for using a potentially fake $20 bill.
Exactly.
Before you know it, four policemen are handcuffing him. Policeman's putting his knee on his neck in a procedure that is totally, not acceptable
Exactly.
by any standard
Exactly.
of policing. And despite, many pleas from people, including people who are filming the incident, he just wouldn't let up until this man's sort of soul leaves his body, basically.
Exactly.
Devastating.
Literally.
Do you
And
feel,
it's good.
Yannick, go
And
for it, go for it.
yeah, just to go on what Jacob was saying that we've seen this so many times. I mean, I guess we can all remember Trayvon Martin, right? So that was
Exactly.
for me the first time that I saw that shit happening on Twitter and saw that video, and and like people, that was the first time I was exposed to it, and that was 6 years ago, and so I was 16, right? From that point on, every other month, there's a new hashtag. So this is not everything that's happening right now is not just George Floyd. This is a culmination of people that have seen shit happen from since they were teenagers, escalate to a point where it's come to violence and it's come to rioting. So
Let's talk a bit about the rioting. How do you feel about that? As in, there's obviously opinion wasn't really divided when it comes to George Floyd. Everyone was very, very clear and adamant, probably for one of the first times, that there was no excuse for what happened. But when it comes to the rioting, obviously, opinion is divided once again between people who
Yeah.
say this is not the way to protest something like this, and others saying, there is no way to protest something like this. And, how do you feel about that, Yannick?
um, brutally honest, I don't think a white person should be telling a black person how to deal with what's happening right now. Um, because even if you the most understanding person in the world, you cannot fully understand the feeling that happens when you see something like that. I can't fully understand what it means to be out there and that stuff happening right across the street. So I can't even judge them, how they feel, if they want to riot, if they want to be silent, if you know, let alone someone else that's not from can is not the same color of my skin, is not the same color of skin that guy that died. You know, there's a privilege in being able to shut that out because that didn't happen to you, right? So as far as the rioting, as me personally, that was my exact same reaction. The first thing I wrote on Instagram was. Um, Obviously I was outraged and it was like, yo, I hope they burn the city down. That was my first reaction, and I'm not ashamed to say it. And so to see that that was most people's first reaction, it just speaks volumes on how everyone is just tired, and we've done peaceful protests, and the next month another hashtag, another police brutality, another incident. So you have to exhaust all ways of trying to communicate, So I'm all for it. If I was there, I would be the first one out there. So
There's also a lot of things said about whether, a lot of the looting and the rioting is being done not by people who are protesting, but by people who have
Hmm.
an interest in disrupting things or just taking advantage
Exactly.
of the situation.
yeah,
Do you think, Jacob?
As in, personally, I do not agree with the looting. Me personally, I would not go out and loot or commit acts of violence because that's not how I am. But I completely understand them in a way. You know what I mean? This is all built up from frustration from generations ago. There were, if you remember, in 1960s, there were the Watts riots, and then in the 1990s, there was the LA riots because of Rodney King and how they almost beat him to death on video. And this is just too much of an often recurrence, you know what I mean? Like, people are very angry and they realize that protesting peacefully doesn't get your message across, you know what I mean? And the only way to show that you mean business, you know what I mean, like to show that you don't want to be stepped on and to put your foot down is by committing acts of violence, you know what I mean.
I was wondering.
But
but listen, the
but at the same
protest.
time
This is
at
very
the same
important.
time
All right, continue, Jacob.
but at the same time, I mean, when you're harming and looting shop owners of your own color, you know, and your own community, it does harm it in a way. But at the same time, when you're burning down a building, a building can be made again. You know what I mean? You can always build it back up again, but you cannot bring back someone who's died. You know what I mean? Someone who you've killed. You know what I mean?
Yannick, you were going to say.
That's absolutely like unacceptable. Like,
Yeah. No, Chris, I was just gonna say that the protests all started peacefully, you know? So if you see the videos on Twitter, they all started peacefully. Then when the police come, they start throwing tear gas, they start throwing rubber bullets, and then what do you expect the
yeah.
people to do? So the protests are peaceful until the police arrive. So that's very important to say.
Okay, so I know obviously you and the rest of us are following what's happening in America. I just want to add a point. I was watching Trevor Noah yesterday. He gave a really interesting explanation about the rioting, where he said, we all kind of accept the social contract of I'm not gonna loot and do crimes because I expect there to be a certain level of order in the country. But if you see your authoritative figures breaking that social contract
Yeah.
so repeatedly,
Hmm.
then it starts to disappear for you as well. But I want to get your perspectives as well and localize this a bit to Malta. You're two people of color in living in Malta. You're Maltese. You've lived here all your lives. What has have you experienced anything like this before? Do you deal with racism and oppression on a daily basis in any way? Yannick, we can start with you.
Um, uh, Obviously, there's a big difference from Malta to America. So I don't want to like compare the two in a way that's like, listen, people are, police are killing people here or anything. It's not to that level. On a daily basis, it's the little things, it's the little jokes, it's the things you notice, but at a point you become numb to, right? On a grander scale, obviously we all know that what happened last year with Lasana Sissa. For me, that was just people that have been saying how much they hate black people and how much they want to kill black people and how much they hate them and they hate immigrants, actually put it into action. So when Lasana happened, I'm going to be honest, I was numb. I didn't want to feel it, So it was like, all right, like that shit happened. I'm not even that surprised. But now, since all these emotions are that I'm feeling for George Floyd have come to the table, now I'm like available to like listen, this Lasana Sissa happened right across the street, basically. And as much as people want to Black Lives Matter when things happen across, far away from us, we have our own shit to deal with. And it starts with the little things that I mentioned in the beginning, the small things that then culminate to hatred and racism
We'll
on
talk,
a bigger scale.
we'll talk a bit more about Lasana Sise, but I want to understand what you mean by the small things. So one of the problems that we know about and that's often been written about has been the situation in nightclubs, for example, in Portugal. You walk in, bouncers, many bouncers seem almost proud of saying that they don't allow black people in. Is this something you've ever experienced, Jacob, for example?
Um, at first, you always get those. It's hard to say, but you always get like a look. You know what I mean? Or someone treats you different. But then once they realize, this person is Maltese. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
They see your ID, or you start speaking Maltese, for example. They'll be like, okay. You know what I mean? This guy is Maltese. He's part of these people. He's not an immigrant. You know what I mean? Which is completely the wrong way to go about it. You know what I mean?
So
But
you do feel
it's not
profile.
just exactly racially profiling, like not just in Pashville, for example, in sports, for example, in schools where I grew up in, for example, you get because people are very I don't want to say ignorant, but I'd say they're ignorant because they don't understand. You know what I mean? And there are not a lot of half Maltese, half black people in Malta, so they can't really understand. And me growing up, I had the majority of my friends are all white, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I can understand if they don't know that they're saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing, but I can always bring it up to them, you know what I mean? And as long as that situation does not occur again, then there shouldn't be any problems, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yannick,
no, I mean,
Yeah, but that gets tiring, Jake, right?
but then again, Azat, and then
That
it
gets
gets tiring.
tiring.
You know what I mean? Like,
You know, how
you
many
have to
times
say
are you gonna
saying
do
the
it?
same thing over and over to different people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you have to explain yourself so
They should
much.
already know. You know what I mean? We live in 2020, for God's sake. You know what I
what,
mean? They should
what, what,
already know.
what gets tiring specifically? What are the questions that you're asked time and time again?
كيف تعمل
Like
شعرك؟
someone.
No, as if ma, it's I can't think of a specific question right now, but it's
A
just
joke, maybe a racial joke that someone would pass by. You know what I mean?
yeah, like it's more like
Like,
it's just a joke, like literally, like it's going. Listen, all I say is to people that think stuff is just a joke, say that same joke in a group full of black men.
exactly.
That's all I
But they
say,
won't do it.
and let's
But they
see
won't do
if
it.
you still think it's a joke.
Yeah.
That's my point. Like I will laugh. We can laugh along. We're friends, but listen, stuff is not a joke as much as it seems. It's a joke for you.
Yannick, do you ever find yourself in situations where you're like disproportionately afraid of the police or some sort of level of authority or security?
Um, I think just based off the videos I've seen, I know there are police in America, but me personally, I'm still like terrified when I see the police. Like when I see soldiers, when I see people of authority, I know that things can go left. It's just a feeling inside that it makes me uneasy. I'm very uncomfortable when it comes to speaking to, not because I've had any personal experiences like police brutality or police violence, but just seeing the videos and, as Jacob said, the little things, racial profiling. I've had instances where I was with my friends. I was just like chilling like next to my car, and then like two police cars just pop up and like this man like ask me for my license, my registration, my ID, all these questions. Then the second I speak in Maltese, they're like, all right, like we had Mentana at the film. So you can see it in their face. Sorry, you can see it in their face, how it changes, how they approach you as soon as they hear you speaking in Maltese and having the Maltese accent. So these are things that do happen, but obviously not to the level that's happening in America or that I've experienced. Let me put it like that.
You were telling me earlier as well, that let's say you'll be at a club and there's a fight in the club, you feel particularly afraid about getting involved. Why is that?
Um, I mean, yeah, I mean, everyone knows the problems with the bouncers. I mean, it's not just a black thing. Like, listen, like these bouncers are fucking animals. But yeah, that crosses my mind that if I get involved, I'm probably gonna get I'm gonna get worse off than other people. So that for sure is a thought that goes through my mind when fights break out or things have to happen. And things do pop off in the club sometimes.
They
So
do.
like it is what it is.
And another
So
video that got a lot of attention this weekend in the US is the Amy Cooper video, where a woman was using a man's sort of blackness to threaten getting the police to him. So this was a black man who was telling a white woman to keep her dog on a leash. She was refusing to put him on a leash, and she brought out her phone and said, "Listen, I'm going to call the police and tell them that an African American man is threatening me," and knowing that by doing so, this person is going to get in trouble, even though he was the person in
Exactly.
the right. How do these things make you feel, Jacob?
Um, Automatically, I mean, the first person that look at would be, or the first instigator that say would be a black person. You know what I mean? And that, like we said, racial profiling, for example, which is absolutely unacceptable. I mean, I personally have not dealt with a situation like that where I've been accused of doing something, for example, which I haven't done just because of my skin color, you know what I mean? Luckily. But abroad, I can see, like in America, for example, I can see like why it happens and how people get very angry about it. I mean, at the end of the day, how to ban it, how to like get rid of racism, for example, is the real question. How do we go about it? Like, you know what I mean? What are the next steps we have to take to try and not live in the past, but see what happens in the future? You know?
And what do you think that can be? What are the? Do you have any ideas on how to combat racism even in Malta?
In Malta, there are not enough, I'd say, people who can understand what you're going through. You know what I mean? So you're kind of on your own. So you kind of have to think about things and figure out things for yourself. But for now, I guess, luckily, it hasn't gotten to that point yet. But obviously, we can't wait until it reaches that point. So we have
But it kind of
to find
has, right?
solutions.
As in, when you know that, as in, it's still an allegation for at the moment, but you've got two, soldiers in court accused of killing in cold blood a man just because of the color of his skin,
Hmm.
shooting
They're out on bail.
men. Yeah, they're out on bail at the moment. Um, as in, I don't even feel that we've reacted appropriately to that incident, right? And you've got an inquiry just came out the other week saying that they've checked if there's any racism in the armed forces of Malta, and there isn't.
Hmm.
I don't know. What do you make of a statement like that? Yeah, like feel free.
Um,
Uh, you want to go? I mean, it's a slap in the face, obviously,
Mala.
because we all know if you talk to anyone, we all know it's you're just insulting our intelligence, and that's the point we're at in Malta. We are not even at the point of acknowledging that it's there, because it will burst our Maltese people are the best people and are the nicest people in fucking Europe and
Hmm.
shit, that will burst our bubble. But listen, like, this shit happens, it happens here. And as much as you want to say, like, away at the sergeant, away, listen, these two soldiers for sure were not the only one that thought like that, you know,
Hmm.
are not the only people with access to guns in Malta that think like that. They were just the only two people brave enough to do it, and they're out on bail. So no wonder they were brave. They know like shit won't happen to them.
They knew that we could do this and get away with it. You know what I mean?
And and me, what goes through my mind when I think about Lasana and that situation, my mind automatically goes, listen, what if it was me? Like, what if it
What's that?
was Jacob? Like, listen, I used to live in army. I used to walk at night 24/7. I mean, I didn't have a car. I used to walk at night anywhere. So you're telling me if I was walking down the street and these two soldiers saw me, what would have happened? Or what if I spoken in Maltese and maybe I would have saved myself?
And
You
and
know?
it's interesting what you were saying before, both of you, about as soon as you speak a bit of Maltese, the bouncers realize, okay, you're Wellingtona, and in a way
Yeah.
that's a kind of privilege as well, right?
It is.
But then and this really, what you're saying now is really the illustration of the um, the reality of being black, that you can't hide that. You can't walk into the streets and not be assumed, for example, in Malta, to be an immigrant, right? And to be
Yeah.
What's that?
someone who might to someone else might want to kill you for
Hmm.
no reason, just for
Exactly.
the color of your skin. And that's something I think a lot of non-black people just don't understand, how that reality, like as in,
Yeah.
I'm a gay man myself, but that's something that I can hide if I need to, almost. You know what I mean? Like this, it's not something that can can
Hmm.
disappear, so to speak. And I think
Hmm.
it's an important discussion about privilege and how this could have been you, yeah, walking in the streets, and it's not enough to just say, it's fine once they realize you're not an irregular immigrant.
Yeah, and you
No, of
said an
course not.
important word. You said privilege. Like you can acknowledge that, and I can acknowledge that. Me living in Malta, me having Maltese accent, and me being light skinned as opposed to being dark skinned is a privilege. So for me, it boggles my mind that then a white person can't acknowledge their own privilege.
Yeah.
Like you guys, your privilege is the fact that when these things happen, you don't think that that shit could have been me. You know, that's your privilege. Because I automatically be like, listen, like as soon as that sign happened, I'm like, yo, like that could have been any one of my guys, or any one of my friends, any one of my, you know, you don't need to think about that. You know, that's never gonna happen to you. If they saw you, they would probably like, I'll see Hibishana, you know? So that's like the situation. That's how but the privilege thing, that's a discussion that has to be open, and people need to acknowledge that. You know, it's not a bad thing, but you need to acknowledge that, listen, because of the color of your skin, um, you're entitled to certain stuff. You do not go through certain stuff as other people do. You know, it's just simple as that. You know.
No,
So, what do
I
you
mean,
think, Jake? I don't know.
I'm seeing
no,
some
no, it's true. Like,
in the comment section already, and we pretend racism isn't among us, and it's right there for everyone to see, So I think this is a discussion that we really need to be having, and even
it
um,
needs to be talked about more often.
yeah, and I think there's also a question of representation as well, as in
Yeah.
if we look at our Maltese media and we only see white people, we forget that there are people of color in our society, and their voices need to be heard just as much as well. So I just want
Mhm.
a final comment from you guys, and we'll wrap up the program, but maybe something. I don't know if it's a message of hope or a message of concern, but I just want you to, I want to know what you think, the next steps are, and what you want to see in the world today.
Well, personally, um, one thing I want to say to anyone who is black or who is of color, and not just like sexual orientation, whatever, like just honestly be proud of who you are. Don't take what people say about you to heart, you know what I mean? I know it's an unfortunate occurrence, like, but you know the type of person you are, and you shouldn't be judged because of what you look like, or who you choose to be with. You know what I mean? Now, on how to move forward with all this, I personally do not have an answer yet. You know what I mean? Which I'm sure a lot of people don't know where to go from here. But I do believe like there is hope. You know what I mean? That all this will turn around, and eventually people will start realizing, like we're killing people, we're putting them in jail, we're scrutinizing them for just being themselves. You know what I mean? Things will, I think, though, hopefully, it will take time. It will take time, but eventually, I think things will be as we want it to be.
Yeah, that's the hope. Yannick,
Yeah. Um.
I mean, we have
Basically,
a comment. Sorry if I can stop you, but we've got a
uh,
comment which I think is an interesting question, which is, have you guys ever experienced racism from your partner's parents, for example, a girlfriend or whatever, thing home, and they,
Um,
I'm pretty sure.
not directly, but like you can sort of tell. You know what
it's
I
always
mean?
a shock. It's
Yeah,
always
you can tell. Not that they won't say it to your face, but you can tell.
There's something, yeah.
it's always a
Yeah,
shock
there's
when
always
it's
there's
black.
always something.
Yeah. Yannick, sorry, I stopped you before. Go ahead, your concluding statement on what you
Uh,
for today.
um, Basically, I want to say like me and Jacob are speaking from a perspective that we're men, right? And we've went through our stuff, we went through our trauma, and we love ourselves as black men. We are not like speaking here today um, for acceptance from the white person. Like we don't need that. We don't need your love. We don't need your admiration. We love ourselves enough. We know our skin is beautiful. We know what's happening is wrong. We just need you to start understanding and stop hating us. That's all we need you to do. We're not looking for your acceptance. We're not looking for you to say, oh, yeah, this guy is right. You know, all I want is you to, the discussion to get started. Like, listen, these guys go through this, and that. I'm not in a position to tell them that their experience is not valid or it didn't happen. Yo, at Yasa Jarao. I have to stop, shut up, and listen to what these people are saying, and accept it for that being their experience. For the way forward, basically, like Jacob, I mean, I think things could get better, but it's gonna get a whole lot worse before it gets better, you know.
Yeah. I have to have hope.
So,
Just hope.
so I have hope, but I don't have hope that I see it in my lifetime, for example. It's going to be a very long process, but it's my and people like me's. I won't say it's our responsibility because everyone deals with it in a different way, but I feel responsible to start the discussion and push this agenda forward. So,
I
yeah,
think I think it's the least we can do when you watch a man's life being taken away from him like that. Uh,
yeah,
the way it happened with George Floyd, I think starting a conversation about it, at least in our communities, is a response. I think there's also other things that we can be doing, in terms of supporting organizations both in the US and in Malta that are fighting racism and fighting for the rights of people who are often victimized. I think it's really interesting, Yannick, that you made a point of saying, we are black men. I think this is it seems to be that it's men specifically who are being targeted on an ongoing basis in the US. There's
women too. I didn't mean it in that way that it's just men.
but there is a bit of a
Women too
gender
for
there is
sure.
a bit of a gender discussion over here as well, right? In a strange way, it's like and there's a lot of discussions in the US about black men and how easy it is for police to go ahead and say, oh, I felt threatened, I was whatever, that's why I
Yeah,
got
yeah, yeah, yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
So anyway, I mean, it's a tough discussion. I'm really glad that we've started it over here because I think
Yeah.
it's a discussion we need to have. Again, judging by the comments, it's clearly a discussion that we need to have. Just a
Yeah.
reminder, Yannick and Jacob are Maltese men who are very active in football, right? Yannick, you play with Brifikara,
Yeah.
and Jacob,
Santa Lucia.
Lucia. Hope the COVID situation hasn't dampened your football too much. Anyway, according to Prime Minister, it's all behind us now, so we'll see where that goes. But thank you so much for talking to me today, guys. For
Thank
being
you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for giving us the platform.
So this has been COVID Calls. I've been Chris Perugine, joined by Yannick and Jacob, and we'll be with you again later this week. Thank you.
Thank you.